Clash of the Classics.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Clash of the Classics. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Donnie. I'll be your host for the next few minutes. If you're new to the show, maybe this is the first time you're tuning us in, you're going to find every week we roll the clock back, either pit two classic cars against one another, or we'll feature one model in particular. Well, today's going to be some fun because we're going to spend some time comparing the 1949 Buick Roadmaster to that 1949 Cadillac Series 62. We'll look at exterior styling. Sometimes we take a peek at the interior stuff. I talk about the powertrain design. Then we talk about parts of the car that we like best. And as always, we welcome you to let us know what you think. Head on over to our website, horsepoweronline.com, or just leave us a message right here on our YouTube channel. These battles are fueled by the largest automatic transmission network in the world. They're the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association, or quite simply, you heard it before, it's the ATRA. And we'll talk more about ATRA in a moment. But for right now, I want to have a look at the 1949 Buick Roadmaster. The 49 Roadmaster was, at least to me, arguably one of the most beautiful cars GM ever produced. It had an overall low profile, a long straight hood, and I love that fastback styling. One of the writers of that time period described it as poetry dressed in steel. I don't know that I disagree with that assessment. In fact, I think that's probably appropriately put. But it was the first Buick with an updated post-war look. It was designed by a guy named Ned Nichols. Now, I did a little research on Mr. Nichols before we went on today, and I discovered this guy's got a pretty cool mind and pretty innovative. For example, most of you out there would probably instantly recognize a classic Buick from a distance by the four vent ports on each side of the car. Well, it turns out there's a pretty cool story behind them. The idea for the vent ports grew out of a modification that Ned Nichols added to his own 1948 Roadmaster. He installed four amber lights on each side of the hood, then he wired them directly to the distributor so that the lights would flash on and off as the plugs fired. The idea was to simulate the flames from the exhaust stack of a fighter airplane. It's kind of wild to think about some of the stuff that inspired styling that most of us take for granted. Pretty cool. But anyway, the lights combined with the bomb sight hood ornament, and it was supposed to put the driver at the controls of an imaginary fighter plane. But back to this 49 Roadmaster. Buick enjoyed some impressive sales numbers back then, with a total sales of nearly 400,000 units that year. Never mind that the windshield was still a two-piece design, that there was no power steering and the engine was a straight 8. Bottom line was it looked gorgeous, and it came with the all-new Dynaflow automatic transmission. The Roadmaster, like the 49 Cadillac that we'll talk about here in a moment, they were definitely influential in what is arguably the most flamboyant decade of car design that we've ever seen. The instrument panel was also new for 1949 with the speedometer gauge positioned directly in front of the driver. It was an idea that GM took straight from Harley Earl's Buick Y job. A lot of you guys out there will remember that. And while the Roadmaster may have shared its overall body design with the Olds 98 and the Cadillac Series 62, the Buick kind of earned a distinction in those days that it somehow hadn't had before. As far as the powertrain was concerned, it was to some degree underpowered, had a straight 8, rated at about 150 horsepower, and a fluid coupling type transmission with that all-new Dynaflow. It would have been a bit better if the car weighed less, but it was tipping the scales at about 4,500 pounds. Now, if you had a couple 200-pound guys in the front seat, you were closer to 5,000 pounds, and trust me, folks, that's a lot of weight for a 150 horsepower engine to try to move. 0 to 60 in about 20 seconds was the posted ratings, but the truth is most folks really weren't overly concerned with acceleration. The whole luxury motif was the real selling point, and sell it did. It was a car to aspire to. The Roadmaster was a brilliant name for the top-of-the-line Buick. Soon became the preferred choice of professionals who couldn't quite reach that Cadillac territory. With an original MSRP of about $2,600, it wasn't for everyone, but it was still within the reach of many. Without question, one of the most iconic models in Buick's catalog, and certainly one of our favorites here on Horsepower for an Hour. And then before I go any further, I want to talk about the largest automatic transmission network on the planet. They are the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association. The ATRA makes our Clash of the Classics possible, and no one knows transmissions better than ATRA. With a member network stretching from coast to coast, there's no better place to be when your car is experiencing transmission troubles than at an authorized ATRA service provider. Head on over to atra.com to find a service provider near you. All right, now let's talk about that 1949 Cadillac Series 62. Now, for those of us who consider ourselves automotive enthusiasts, and I certainly do, we owe a lot to the 1949 Cadillac. It brought us tail fins and a high-compression V8. And it was Harley Earl that came up with the rear rudders. In fact, it was so revolutionary, it became a trendsetter. And a guy named John Gordon was the brains behind the Braun. Between them, they created the basic vernacular of the post-war American car. In 1949, the 1 millionth Caddy rolled off the production line, and the stunning Series 62 Fastback, or the Sedanette, as some people know it, was born. And before I say another word about this car, I gotta confess, folks, that of all the classic cars that we've covered here on Horsepower for an Hour, and it's been some 7 or 8 years now, this car is my absolute number one favorite classic car. In fact, I like this car even better than I like the 1956 F100 pickup. Trust me, that's saying something. I don't believe there's ever been a car quite like this Cadillac. It was handsome and quick, had the 4-speed hydromatic transmission, beautifully curved windshield, hydraulically operated front seats and windows. In short, this car was a complete revelation. Even the Italians gave it a nod of respect when they said, quote, "The new Cadillac is not only a beautiful and distinguished motor car, but its performance is a challenge to the imagination," unquote. To sum it up, you could say the American dream and the finest era in American cars began with that 1949 Cadillac. The trend-setting new overhead valve 331 cubic inch V8 developed 160 horsepower and weighed 188 pounds less than that earlier L-head design. It made the 49 Cad one of the faster cars on the road. Then inside, the cabin was heavily chromed, very spacious. Colors were gray, blue, or brown, had wool carpets that matched. Seats were available in either leather or cloth. Full instrumentation and AM radio were standard equipment, and the ride quality, especially for 1949, definitely excellent. The rear fins that went on to become a Caddy trademark were actually inspired by the Lockheed P-38 fighter plane. I spent some time looking at this, and I enjoyed the heck out of this research. Talk about an idea that really caught on. By 1959, the fins had reached Titanic height. I mean, you remember some of those 59 models, but definitely a cool time period. British motoring journalist S.E. Davis reported on the 49 Cadillac as one of the 6 most outstanding cars of the post-war decade. That same year, Motor Trend magazine named it the car of the year. And as I said earlier, you'll get no argument from me about this car. It's a timeless favorite. It never seems to get old. Well, thanks for hanging out with us today. It's just about all the time we have. Big thanks to everyone at the Automatic Transmission Rebuilders Association. ATRA makes our Clash of the Classics feature possible. Next time you've got a transmission problem or you've got a transmission question, check them out at atra.com. Thanks again. We'll see you next week.
Passing down the scarlet line.